smart. And sometimes he thinks he's smarter than he is. And I have no quarrels with saying that, because I'll say that to his face. There's times where it can become a distraction. But, we have guys on our team who are mature enough to know when to take it over the line and when to back off. And sometimes Sherm is the main one who does that, because we get frustrated at times. As competitive as we get, we know how successful and how good we can be. And when we're not living up to that expectation, it is frustrating.
Keep in mind, Doug Baldwin, of course, was teammates with Richard Sherman at Stanford, also highly intelligent. So is Will Cain. Good to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
I want to start with you, though, Stephen A. What do you make of Baldwin's comments on Sherman?
Well, I respect his opinion because he's his teammate, not just in college, but in the pros. And he obviously knows Richard Sherman significantly more than me. So I don't think his words can be summarily dismissed in terms of, the insight he provides, because it's simply, you can't challenge it unless you're that close to Richard Sherman, which I don't know anybody in the media to be. Even though I know Richard Sherman a little bit, and we certainly talk from time to time, as I do with several members in that locker room. I will tell you this, where I respectfully disagree with Doug Baldwin, but not in a debatable fashion, is looking on the outside in and just watching this team. The problem with this team is not their defense. The problem with this team is religiously their offense. It's their offensive line since Unger was gone. It's their running back since Marshawn Lynch departed. It's all of those things. It's Russell Wilson injuries, not an elite receiver on their squad, even though Doug Baldwin can play, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at the Seattle Seahawks and you got questions about them, it ain't their defense, it's their offense. When I look at Richard Sherman, I see a dude that religiously is one of the top 5 to top 7 corners in the game. Religiously over the past 5 or 6 years of going about the business of making sure that half or less of the passes thrown in his direction and his coverage get completed. You don't complete passes on a regular basis against this man. When you're a elite receiver and you're Julio Jones and you're catching, 9 passes for 180 yards against Green Bay, you go against a Richard Sherman and suddenly the number is 6 receptions for 67 yards. Don't tell me that Richard Sherman is the problem. Could he be a distraction? Anybody could be somewhat of a distraction if they have a mouth on them and they're smart and they know it. And as a result, their intellect is in your face all the time, because sometimes they can think they're actually smarter than they really are. I go through it every day. Look at the 2 people that I'm going to on the show with me right now. They think they're brilliant.
In your face.
But the point is, at the end of the day, Richard Sherman's production elevates above all that noise. And I don't think this is applicable to him, even though I respect where Doug Baldwin is coming from, because he has a right to do so.
I don't see this as an issue at all. In fact, I see this as a reflection of a healthy environment that Pete Carroll has fostered here. I mean, this is what it's about, honest communication. You could say don't air your dirty laundry, but Doug Baldwin said, I have no problem saying this to his face, and I'm sure he doesn't. I don't understand really the problem with that if it's not something he wouldn't tell him to his face, and this is the way the team communicates. This is what it's about, and it's not always easy going, but I see a team not making excuses. The defense isn't there going, well, the problem is the O-line and the no running game publicly. They'll look at themselves. Everyone will look at themselves. If someone asks a player a question, they'll give him an honest answer. And in fact, Baldwin went on to say that same competitive drive, it was what makes Richard Sherman the best cornerback in the game. So he's really answering honestly. And I don't see where this is a problem. This is the kind of team that has that kind of loose enough environment that the players can vent, even sometimes in public demonstrations of anger at one another. But it's always understood that it's in the service of individuals wanting to win and come together as a team. And that's to Pete Carroll's credit, and it's to the players' credit, and it's the reason that they have been the closest thing the NFC has to the Patriots in recent years.
You don't see a problem, Max, because there isn't one. There is no problem. And despite what Stephen A. Smith just argued to all of us, Doug Baldwin didn't place all of the Seattle Seahawks problems on the shoulders of Richard Sherman. He didn't use Richard Sherman as a distraction, as a scapegoat for all of the Seahawks' problem. What you said, yeah. What you said,
all. I said all.
You went on to use Doug Baldwin's comments to then point out that Richard Sherman isn't the problem with the team, and both can be true. It is true. The Seahawks offensive line is their problem. Richard Sherman's cornerback play is not their problem. But here's what's great about what Baldwin said. It is the kind of honesty we rarely get in sports. What we have known to be true, what is obvious to all of our eyes, that Richard Sherman can be a distraction to a team, has now been validated by somebody in that locker room. Not only that, one of his best friends dating back through his pro career to his college career. When you yell at the offensive coordinator on the sidelines, when you threaten a member of the media that you could ruin their career or have their press credentials revoked, false by the way, you can become and are a distraction to the team. We now have it from the team, from possibly the closest member on the Seahawks to Richard Sherman. Now, does that mean every problem that the Seahawks have is Richard Sherman's fault? Of course it doesn't. Nobody would argue that it does. But what we now know is true is that our eyes aren't lying to us. And when pundits and people that get on TV, for some reason there's this trend to be an athlete apologist, that whenever what we see is true, that no one's ever guilty of bad behavior, that no one can ever be a distraction. But when our eyes are showing us the opposite, it turns out we're right. And here's the real kicker. Baldwin is so smart on this, so incredibly intelligent. I am a firm subscriber to the your greatest strength can be your greatest weakness philosophy. He points that out with Richard Sherman. His passion, his smarts, they go over the edge. His pride leads him to being the best. His pride leads him to not listening. Every one of us are guilty of this. Stephen A., you're a great talker. You could do a bit more listening. Max, you're a great analyzer. Perhaps a bit more action. Me, we're still looking for these things with me. We're looking for these weaknesses. But this is true. Your strength is your weakness in life. You've got to manage that line.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciated Dr. Phil. I'm really touched by your analysis there. Thank you so much. That's number one. Number two, you sitting there and pointing out how some media members are apologists for athletes. Well, maybe if you got yourself in a locker room more and got to know these guys on a personal level, you wouldn't be calling anybody an apologist. You would recognize the need to be fair, because when an individual gives you a direct perspective from where they're coming from,
excuse me,
you take that. Hold
was
on.
I not sitting with you yesterday? Was I not sitting with you yesterday?
I let you speak. Did I not let you speak? I let you speak. My point to you is this. If you're sitting up there and you're talking about an individual, and that individual decides to comment and speak directly to you, in this position as a journalist, as a member of the Fourth Estate, actually covering teams and covering athletes and doing it for over 20 years, you do feel an obligation. You do feel an obligation to make sure their perspective is heard. That's not being an apologist. It's called being fair.
Let me respond,
which
please.
I was told by Will Kane is very, very, very important to him.
Yes.
Let's be fair, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, hold on. Quick response here. Don't take it so personally. I wasn't talking about you. I didn't call you an apologist.
By the way,
I'm not here debating you. Of course I'm going to take.
Let Will finish and then Max needs to get in.
I'm losing sleep over it. I'm just responding.
But just to be clear to both.
Personally,
Max, just one second.
Richard Sherman probably doesn't take this personally. As I said, Will, you're making this about what we see in Richard Sherman. Can he be a distraction? And obviously, someone who knows him and has been with him for a while says, yes, he can be. But the main thing about Richard Sherman is he gives you the straight dope. You ask him a question, Crabtree at the time, he's mediocre. That's what he felt. He will be honest, and we like that. And now here is a teammate being honest about him.
Yes.
And that's the kind of atmosphere that Pete Carroll has fostered. That's the way this team communicates. And I actually think it's one of the reasons it's a healthy team and a successful one.
Well, yes, that's great. Yes, it's a healthy team. I'm glad that Pete Carroll allows them to speak out and lets us to see the truth.
One thing, though, Will. I don't think it's healthy or successful, though, necessarily to bring the media in. When he could have that conversation, Doug could have that conversation with Richard Sherman. You don't need to tell the media about it when it's a healthy team. That's my personal opinion.
Sherman tells the media about it.
Okay, but I'm just telling you, my personal opinion is you keep it inside the locker room.
Well, Doug Baldwin also suggests he would say this directly to Richard Sherman's face. In fact, I would imagine he probably has. But just to clear up one point that I think got run over. I never said you were an apologist, Stephen A., because I don't think it. I don't think you are. I think you offer harsh and exact criticism when you think it. But I don't think you are everyone in the media. And I do think there is a trend to think that anybody that offers critique of an athlete is somehow being a big bad meanie and just somehow trying to exercise their own insecurities, as we did yesterday with Darrelle Revis. The point is to be fair, as you point out, and to find the truth. And sometimes athletes need to be defended, like in Darrelle Revis's case. And sometimes, if the truth demands it, it requires criticism. And when it's being pointed out that Richard Sherman is a distraction, I think we have an obligation to then therefore show that now, especially that we know that some in the team think so.
Okay.
Okay. So now this is according to Mike Lombardi of Fox Sports. Baldwin may not have to deal with Sherm much longer, saying that based on what he's hearing around the league, Seattle would trade Richard Sherman for the right deal. Max, should Seattle consider moving him?
You have to consider, in the NFL, anyone is movable. You always have to consider it. But would I trade Richard Sherman if I were Seattle? No. When Earl Thomas is back there, that combination, I mean, where do you find corners of Sherman's quality? They're not growing on trees. That's a rare and excellent and exceptionally important commodity in today's NFL. The way offenses work, the defensive backfield, so important. Sherman is elite, particularly when Earl Thomas is also back there. I wouldn't move him.
Go ahead, Will.
I would definitely consider it. I mean, if the going rate for a marquee corner in the NFL is a first-round draft pick, if that's what we're seeing from Malcolm Butler, you have to consider it with Richard Sherman, age 29, or turns 29 in a few days. We talked about Darrelle Revis many times over the last few days. And when Darrelle Revis was 29, he was the third-ranked corner, according to Pro Football Focus, in the NFL. He quickly went down at age 30 and 31 to this past year being the 66th ranked corner. I'm not saying that Richard Sherman is Darrelle Revis. Well, Max, yeah. I mean, there's an example.
There's certain ages where certain positions fall off.
In retrospect. But I would suggest if there's value to be gained from a man who is turning 29 and currently at the peak of his game, you might think about the corner's peak at age 23, 24, 25, and see if you can find the next Richard Sherman.
Well, listen, if you're talking about just numbers and age and all of that stuff, I'm not here to refute that. I thought we were talking about a brother's game here, and if we're talking about his game, I don't want to hear this nonsense about trading Richard Sherman. Who the hell are you going to have to replace him if you're the Seattle Seahawks? Yes, he's going to turn 28. Oh, my God. Let's wipe the dust off of that birth certificate. He's going to turn 29 soon. Are you kidding me? He's one of the top corners in the game. And by the way, who's on the opposite ends of the corner? What, Sean Sheed and Jeremy Lane. That's what y'all got for me. And we having a conversation about trading Richard Sherman from the number 3 ranked defense in the National Football League.
There's no debate.
What the hell have you two
about who
been
Richard
drinking this morning? Max, your iced coffee. What is that, iced tea or whatever iced coffee that you've been drinking? Will, what the hell are you drinking in the morning? We're having a discussion for the number 3 defense in the NFL. The Legion of Boom with this dude at the cornerback slot where you don't even get to complete half your passes against them. And you got Sheed and Jeremy Lane on the other side of the field. He's got his side of the field on lockdown, and we're talking about moving him.
There's no debate.
Do you know what Branch Rickey used to say? Branch Rickey was one of the greatest GMs ever, invented the farm system in baseball.
With your baseball analogies,
the color barrier with
NFL.
Jackie Robinson.
I'm sick of your
Branch Rickey used to say, trade a player a year too early instead of a year too late, to Will's point. There may be some wisdom in that, which is why I would listen.
Somebody from the new millennial? Could you at least do that for me? Could you quote somebody from the new millennial? That's 1947. Could you quote somebody from the new millennial? Could you do it?
When you, even a first-round draft pick at the corner position is still, it's not a total crapshoot, but you're hoping, you're projecting. Richard Sherman is still excellent. He's still premium at a premium position right now.
There's no debate about who Richard Sherman has been or who he is right now. You're not suckering me into that debate, Stephen A. It's about who Richard Sherman will be over the next 3 years.
You should be ashamed of yourself, both of you. Both of you should be ashamed of yourself.
Right.
And Max, stop bringing up baseball quotes from the 40s.
Death, taxes, and Max with a good baseball analogy. Can always count on it.
He won't stop. I know you won't stop. I know Max won't stop. I know
you for being with us. We'll see you in just a little bit. Guys, can we move on? Cool. Thank you. Adrian Peterson, meanwhile, his career could potentially be over in Minnesota, but it is over, excuse me. But will he go down as a better Viking than Randy Moss? Find out that in just a bit.